Spread out, down. Look at it. You got all that room.
Share. Until I can haul mine out. I'm having a shrug.
She used to be right here. That was for 6 years.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a big habit when you got reading them. I bet.
Apparently Joe's in here. Oh, Joe's over there.
I dropped this earlier and I can't find this now. Hopefully it still works.
Oh, no.
I'm going to get in trouble.
You're bust.
That's okay. I can probably just borrow yours.
Okay.
You don't need it. You got a finger, right?
I do have a finger.
It's dead anyway. I don't know who I am. Something happened. I won't be able to.
They're on. But you're not recording yet?
Where's the horse ribbons? Okay, horse ribbons. I was talking to somebody who
You guys recording now?
family lives over by Blue Ribbon, by Naperville, which was where Blue Ribbon stables were. I used to show my horse there, and I'm sure it's changed a lot though. But that whole area in Illinois is. But people are running from there like rats. Two of the finalists for Littleton are from Illinois.
What was your thing this week?
Manager, they haven't started to hire their attorneys.
Dunkin' Donuts?
We're not going forward with the charge.
Not at all?
Almond's still doing it.
Jeez.
Nice.
Man, we have to catch me up.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Please prepare for the invocation and Pledge of Allegiance.
Our gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for this evening and the fact that this year is coming to an end. Just thank you for your faithfulness to us throughout this year. I pray that you would be with us this evening, that you would guide us and direct us, and that you would give us, at the end of this season and the beginning of Christmas, just an abundant supply of your peace and goodwill. Lord, we thank you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Yes, members Olson,
Happy holidays, everybody.
Barentine,
Barentine?
Here.
Gillett,
Present.
Martinez,
Present.
Russell,
Present.
Yates, and Mayor Jefferson.
Here.
6 present and 1 absent, the 1 absent being Councilmember Yates.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 6. This is recognition of scheduled public comment. Our first agenda item for the evening is the 2017
The
Student
minutes.
Art Calendar Recognition.
The minutes.
And it's
Oh, excuse me. I'm jumping way ahead, aren't I? Sorry.
You made it
Yes.
nervous.
Move on to agenda item 5. That is consideration of minutes of the previous session. Thank you, folks. I'm open to a motion at this time.
Mr. Mayor, I move we adopt the minutes as presented for 12/5/2016.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any amendments or comments? Seeing none, please vote.
All votes have been cast. The record shows 6 ayes.
Okay, now we will move on to agenda item 6, recognition of scheduled public comment. Allison Carney, our communications manager, is present to present the 2017 Student Art Calendar Recognition Awards.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight we have the fun honor of recognizing these student artists one more time. We had a ceremony for the top 50 artists this October here in Hamden Hall, and then tonight we'll recognize again the top 13 that include the cover and then each of the 12 months, and they can take their framed artwork home with them. And then we also have 2 tickets to an Inglewood Arts performance throughout the year that they can use, and we have lots of calendars here tonight for everybody to take And we have a bunch back on that back table for anyone to take to on their way out. So I thought it'd be fun. I'm not sure if all 13 are here, but I'll just start calling them up. They're lined up in order as they appear in the calendar. So we'll start with the cover, and that's Maisie Sturock. And I don't know if the...
Would you like us to come down to help greet
if
the winners
mayor
here?
and Amy can come down and help hand out their
great.
work and their calendar and these. January is Jessica Connell. Yeah. February, Amelia Muhlenberg. March, Leah Brocher. Sorry. April, Kirsten McCarthy. May Eva Windhouse. House. June Red Henderson. July Daniel Galindo. Okay, August is Paley Patrick. September, Roxana Santos Perez. October, Raymond Blue. November, Ella Fouts.
They're all studying for finals.
And December, Carlo Camut. So thank you, Mayor and Council, again for being part of the selection panel again this year. I think the calendars turned out really nice for 2017, so make sure everybody grabs one on their way out.
You know, just to go a little bit out of order here, if we wanted to do any council response to the awards, I just wanted to congratulate all the winners and thank you for coming down this evening to accept these wonderful frames, again, donated to us by behalf of Frame to Art here in Inglewood, and we appreciate their contributions and appreciate all the student art. Please take a calendar home with you. Thank you for coming this evening. Councilmember Martinez.
I want to thank all the students for participating in this, and thank you for all the art teachers that are here supporting our students and helping to keep the creative spirit alive in our kids. The student art calendar is one of my most favorite things that we do, so I love it, and I'm so happy to be part of it. And thanks to Kim Young, she is our finest art teacher. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Olson.
Yeah, I wanted to have any public school teachers, officials stand and see who's here that we might not have recognized. Is there anybody besides Kim? And then how about parents who helped support their kids in this? Are there any parents here tonight or relative or guardians that are, yeah, there you go. Thanks for being so supportive of them in arts. It's and I want to again thank Brian Hart with Frame to Art. He's been such a wonderful, generous person to the city. Over and over every year he does this for free for us, and it's amazing. So,
Yes, Councilmember Olson, thank you again for pointing out so many people made this possible tonight. I think one of the most important things we do as a community is provide opportunities for success for our youth and recognize them when they achieve that success. So congratulations again to all the winners. We're going to move on, and feel free to exit. We won't take it personally. We'll move on to our next item, which is Agenda Item 6B, Keep Inglewood Beautiful Holiday Lighting Award Distribution. I believe we have Jeremy Lott, City Planner, here to help us with this award distribution.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I'm here to help present the Keep Inglewood Beautiful Holiday Decorating Event Awards. Councilmember Amy, if you want to, or Martinez, if you want to come down here, please. Okay, we'll start with the Mayor's Choice Award presented to David Alfred LeMay. And if you're here tonight, feel free to come up and grab it.
If not, though, would you mind reading the address into the record for others to take a look?
We don't have the addresses.
Oh, geez, okay.
Not on hand. They are published on the website, though.
Okay, great. So check a look at the website. Thank you.
With the winners.
Thank you.
Or they will be in the morning. Okay, this award is called Terrific Teeter Totter. It's presented to Cindy Krager and Bones Herberg. And there were a few creative names that Keep Inglewood Beautiful came up with, kind of based on what the decorations were. And next, we have Winter Wonderland by Sandy Linger. And this one is All About Animals by Mary Darkin and Terry Tadlock. And then we're going to move into the honorable mentions. So this one is presented to Tom Dudley. And once again, honorable mention presented to Rich Morales. Honorable mention again, Mike, Megan, Maddie, and Macy. And last but not least, honorable mention for Doug Haas. And that's it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lott.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to agenda item, 6C, that is Chili's Friedman, Inglewood resident, representative for Friends of Diversity Inglewood. We'll ask council to make Inglewood a sanctuary city for undocumented workers. Do we have a speaker this evening? Good evening. Welcome.
So I'm Charles Friedman, and I talked to you, Joe, on the phone briefly, and you were very supportive of us making our case for a topic we want to discuss tonight, and Kathy is going to carry on from here. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Kathy Woody. I'm a 38-year resident of Inglewood. A year and a half ago, I retired from Inglewood Schools, where I served as administrator and teacher. I am here tonight with a few members of a newly formed group called Friends of Diversity Inglewood. We currently, you have this, by the way, in front of you. We currently have 76 members, made up of a variety of Inglewood residents, and every day we have more people joining our group. Our goal is to promote inclusion of peoples from differing backgrounds through community volunteering, outreach, education, and policy development. We are here tonight to urge Inglewood City Council to make the city of Inglewood a sanctuary city. A sanctuary city is a city that protects undocumented workers from deportation. They do this by enacting policies and practices in which law enforcement and other local authorities do not actively pursue undocumented immigrants for the purpose of deportation, nor do they actively investigate to determine if an immigrant is illegal. The only case in which law enforcement might pursue undocumented immigrants is if they are suspected of breaking a law that threatens the community, such as a violent crime. There are several benefits to a city for this type of policy. First, undocumented workers can continue to work without fear of authorities, provided they commit no violent crime. Secondly, local and county jails remain available to house real and viable human threats to a community because jail cells are no longer used as necessary holding areas for nonviolent offenders. Sanctuary cities allow a city to say it will not enact policies prohibiting people from coming forward and reporting a crime if they are in this country illegally. This means undocumented workers are free to report crimes without fear of immigration reprisals. And fourth, law enforcement are free to focus on real crime issues, continuing to keep our neighborhoods safe. Energies are not diverted away from criminal activity or unnecessarily toward contributing undocumented workers. Additionally, many cities avoid developing policies that are harmful to our undocumented worker neighbors. Essentially, this means that police officers and other city officials do not report to federal authorities any information regarding an undocumented worker unless a crime has been committed. And it is my understanding this already is the current practice of our Inglewood police. Colorado has a number of cities that have already declared themselves sanctuary cities. These include, but are not limited to, Denver, Aurora, Commerce City, Thornton, Westminster, and Fort Collins. These cities recognize the importance and value the contribution that our undocumented friends give to their respective communities. More importantly, these cities recognize the overall benefit to all residents of sanctuary cities. Recent studies show that many American cities are fighting to attract immigrant populations. Why? Because cities that are welcoming to immigrants benefit economically. immigrant populations are more likely to start new businesses and revitalize the workforce. As Inglewood strives to attract new businesses and revitalize its economy, immigrants can play a key role in achieving those goals. In fact, immigrant businesses make up 11 to 12% of the small businesses in Colorado. Attached to your copy is more detailed information in an attachment called Immigrant Small Business Owners in Colorado. The key tenets of a sanctuary city, I've got about 30 more seconds. Can I finish?
No, I apologize. Just take about 5 more seconds to conclude.
Inglewood as a sanctuary city becomes a safer and more diverse community. If you need help in exploring this issue more fully, or if you need any questions answered, there is a list of those of us that you can contact.
Thank you.
Thank you
any
for your
questions
time.
from council? Please stick around just for a moment for questions from council if they might have some questions of you. Councilmember Barentine.
I had some people had seen this on Nextdoor and kind of how it got started, and it sounds like you guys have done a couple of volunteer projects. But when they went to look it up, they said that there was another organization. Are you part of a larger organization, Friends of Diversity, and you're like an offshoot of them?
No.
Oh, because there is another one. You might want to check that out because people are getting a little confused, I guess.
I don't know.
No, there's only one group called Friends of Diversity Inglewood.
Child started.
Well, there's only one group called Friends of Diversity Inglewood, but there's Friends of Diversity, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's
So are you connected
happening
with
around
them?
the country.
Pardon?
These groups are probably, happening around the country, getting started.
There's only one in Inglewood, though.
Similar groups, but not affiliated, it sounds like. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, yeah, it does. You might want to check because it does kind of they seem to think that you were affiliated. So if I could get some more information later, I won't bother you about it now, but thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, I appreciate you both speaking this evening.
But we'll make comments during the next time, right? Because they're sort of new
We'll
here.
get on to...
We make comments later.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank
We.
you.
Our next speaker is Sean Crozier. Will address council regarding a complaint against the Inglewood Police Department. Sean here tonight? Seeing nobody, I'm moving on to our next speaker, which is Colleen Dickerson, Inglewood resident, will address council regarding communication. Good evening, Mrs. Dickerson.
My name is Colleen Dickerson. I live at 2835 South Pennsylvania Street. Good evening. I come before council a few weeks ago and shared my prayer that you, staff, and citizens would hold ourselves to far higher standards of truth and communication. Sadly, my prayer has been answered in the negative. In November, the City Council paid for what amounts to a counseling session to help them communicate better and in what was termed rich light instead of the harsh light, conflict, and drama that council seems prone to. Unfortunately, few took advantage of the information. What I observed, like side conversations, arguing with the facilitator, among a few other questionable behaviors, has escalated in subsequent council meetings, with unsubstantiated accusations being directed at other council members. Propaganda has seemingly won over rational discourse. There is little evidence of rational discourse with Inglewood City Council because opposing sides do not appear to share the same principles. Decisions in council are not made by making a more compelling rational argument than the other side. They are only made through irrational means: propaganda, protest, and intimidation. A few definitions and examples might clarify the communication problems. Since there is limited time, I have passed out definitions of the few of the logical fallacies I have observed in council meetings. Hubris, mentioned in the Pyburn training: overweening pride, exaggerated self-confidence, and arrogance. Projection, accusing others of what you are obviously guilty of in order to deflect attention off of your own transgressions. More generally, projection is a form of defense mechanism in which someone attributes thoughts, feelings, and ideas which are perceived by them as undesirable but attributed to somebody else. For example, "This has got to stop," A statement made loudly in council last meeting. I agree, projection has to stop. Also needing to stop is loudly asserting specious, illogical, irrational accusations. Of course, if council members want to behave thusly on video, go ahead and continue complaining that people browbeat you over your words and behavior. Only you are in control of your behavior. Respect. Certain council members demand respect for their position and denigrate and disrespect citizens. When you treat citizens with harsh light and disrespect, you lose any respect that might be accorded to you for your position. Oaths of office. The Bill of Rights takes precedence over the state laws, which take precedence over the charter and ordinances. Please keep that in mind when asserting charter requirements. The charter, which needs great revision, for instance, should we violate the city manager for failing to enforce his first requirement under the charter, which says he's responsible to enforce laws and manage airports? Last study session, methodology was used as an excuse to dismiss evidence that countered anecdotal evidence and unsubstantiated opinions. Most evidence is not obtained or validated by methodology. Claiming bad methodology as a reason to dismiss evidence is illogical. For instance, it's a fallicist fallacy, post hoc, and arguing from ignorance, to name a few. It's also harsh light. There is no methodology that can suggest, much less prove, that residency restrictions will stop predators, nor are children protected while behind the imaginary barrier, nor when they leave the 1,000-foot imaginary boundaries. Further, asserting that this reduction in restrictions will open up more areas of the city for sex offenders to live is illogical and irrational. If the court declines to restrict a convicted person's access to children, who are you to impose any further judgment otherwise? Reduction of residency requirements does not represent the achievement of a rational consensus, but the winner's more effective use of the irrational. I will continue to pray for this council and remind you of your oath and presumed responsibility to be objective and rise above your personal agendas and faults. Please represent the best and the truth in your discussions and ordinances. Avoid hubris. Take the training given to you by Mr. Pyburn to heart. To follow up on that training, view open, respectful communication with each other and the public, not as an obligation, nor dangerous or beneath you, but as an opportunity to build relationships which can be mutually beneficial. Besides, it is state law to be open, and it is vitally necessary to win trust and support in elections.
Thank you. Let me see if we have any questions for you, Mrs. Dickerson. Seeing none, I'll thank you for coming and speaking this evening. I've been informed our next two speakers are not present, so we're going to move on then to agenda item 7, which is recognition of unscheduled public comment. And we do have two speakers this evening there. Our first is Brian Brockhausen, speaking about victims of Inglewood. Good evening, Mr. Brockhausen.
Evening, Council. Brian Brockhausen, 4810 South Fox Street. At no point through this process have I ever wanted to come across as apathetic toward victims of sexual abuse. It's a horrific crime. It's traumatizing. I know, I am one. There was a vicious circle that was started in my life at a very young age. I thank God today that there was an intervention from the police departments. What's not to help me and tell me to get some treatment so I could grow and get a heart that God's given me now. I have the list of all of our registered sex offenders in Inglewood. There's roughly 100 people on the list that live within Inglewood. 50 of those people are soon to become victims of this city council as they're evicted from their homes. For what? Because these 100 people, because since the inception of registration in 1991, there has not been one incident of a registered sex offender acting out at a school, a park, a playground, a rec center. Not that we've been able to find in our research. Yet, because of good behavior, because people have a goal of no more victims, and because people want to live healthy and right lives, we're going to punish 50 of them and kick them out. Doesn't seem fair. Doesn't seem fair at all. In December 2012, there was a sexual assault committed in Inglewood by a registered sex offender. It was at Chuck E. Cheese. No magic circle, no circle of 3 feet, 300 feet, or even 3 miles could have prevented that, because this person didn't even live in Inglewood, come from a surrounding community. Why victimize people who have worked so hard to live healthy lives? Doesn't make sense. It really doesn't. So I'm just here to remind tonight, and I hope that when it comes public hearing time, the people who have been traumatized, as they come forward and they share, and I hope that they do, but I hope that these people are survivors, and they're in a position to be able to handle that. I spoke with a man the other day who's currently going under and will be convicted of a sexual assault, has lived in Inglewood for 24 years. They're going to take it to trial and take the victim through trial because he doesn't want to take a plea bargain, doesn't want to lose his home. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. See if council has any questions for you this evening. Seeing none, thank you for coming and speaking this evening, Mr. Brockhausen. Our next speaker is Susan Walker, here to speak about Denver/Title VII. Good evening, ma'am. Oh, sorry. Title VII, then. I'll amend that.
My name is Susan Walker, and I direct the Coalition for Sexual Offense Restoration. You've all heard me speak many, many times. I really debated about coming tonight. I was very disappointed at the response last week from Dr. Olson after reading some of the literature, at least, that we had provided in terms of it not being enough. I was amazed that someone of your stature would read all that literature and not realize that the best minds in the sexual offense arena had gone into putting that literature together. And I thought, why are we coming? Why are we even bothering to say what we're saying to this council? Because they still don't get it. They still don't understand what the literature says. We have had some of the greatest leaders in the sexual offense arena, the prevention of victimization in the Denver area here to speak to you folks. We had Melissa Roberts, who is the director of the Department of Parole for the Colorado Department of Corrections. We had Mr. John Odenheimer, who was a longtime probation officer for Arapahoe County and is now the vice chair of the Sex Offender Management Board. We've had Michelle Ging, who is the Standards and Guidelines Coordinator for the Sex Offender Management Board, oversees all the writing of the standards and guidelines for that organization. And I am certainly not in the same realm as they are, but I've been in this system for 15 years with a son who committed a sexual offense. And I am well studied. I've been to all the SOMB meetings. I work on all of their committees. I work at putting the standards and guidelines together right alongside the therapists and the parole and probation officers. And I have read all the literature that I can get my hands on to try to stay on top of this. I am not in favor of producing more victims. And the way to not produce more victims is to listen to what the literature says. We need to be putting our money into education and not putting all of our money for public safety into the 20% of people who have committed sexual offenses. There are 80% out there, according to the victim's own literature, their own belief system, that says that your neighbors and my neighbors are committing sexual offenses and they have not been caught or convicted? What are we doing about them? How are we educating the community to try to stop what's happening? I hope that you folks will begin to see the rationality behind what we've been saying. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from Councilor Mrs. Walker? Councilmember Valentine.
Of the organizations that you mentioned that have already come and spoken to us,
I'm sorry?
of the organizations that you mentioned that have already come and spoken to us, are there any major players in this that we have not yet heard from?
Well, I would have been happy to take a little money from my organization to bring Dr. Jill Levinson here, who is one of the leading researchers in this area, to speak to this council and to anyone from the city of Inglewood that wants to listen. But it just hasn't sounded as if anybody wanted to go the direction of having any more.
What organization is she with?
I'm sorry?
What organization is she with?
Well, she's a researcher and also a treatment provider in this area. You know, she's a person who's very knowledgeable about residency restriction and other sexual offense kinds of issues. She's internationally known. Most of the publications that we gave you had her name on them.
Okay. And then just one real quick question, since I delved through all of that. I really didn't see a lot of anything dealing with.
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time.
I didn't see a lot dealing with any restrictions from places like, you know, pornography or sex places. Is there any research that says any of that is any contributing factor to anybody offending?
It's really interesting. The literature out there doesn't necessarily draw a parallel with pornography in terms of people committing sexual offenses. That certainly doesn't mean that it isn't sometimes a protagonist, but in terms of people that go to pornography shops or whatever, necessarily being the people that we're concerned about that may sexually offend, that doesn't necessarily go together. There's literature out there to support that.
Okay, thanks. That question came up. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mrs. Walker, for being here this evening. We're going to move on to council response to public comment. Anybody like to kick us off this evening? I've got a few comments. I would like to thank Planner Lott for helping us with the KEB Holiday Lighting Award distributions this evening. It was nice to see so many families participate in our community and get into the holiday spirit. Hopefully we do get those addresses on our website so folks in the community can take a nice little tour of our neighborhood and see some of the hard work that folks have been putting into their yards. Mr. Friedman, thank you for coming and speaking about the sanctuary city idea. You know, this is kind of a new topic for us. Appreciate you bringing it forward. Looking forward to seeing if we have some comments regarding this under member's choice to see if this is something that the council would like to explore further. Also like to thank Colleen for coming, giving us her advice there. Unfortunately, Mrs. Bailey could not be here, but I will, if you don't mind, Mr. Keck asked for an update regarding what I know that she was going to ask us, which is, do we have an update on our 2010 missing residual report?
I'll actually call up our utilities director, Tom Brennan. He has a report on that.
Excellent. Mr. Brennan, welcome. Thank you for being here tonight.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. I'll give you the background. On August 16th, 2016, we had an open records request for the ACZ 2010 analytical report. City staff searched the files as well as the computers of current and previous employees who dealt with residuals, and the records were not, the 2010 report was not found. All other ACZ reports were intact. In an effort to recover the report, we contacted CDM Smith, the engineer who represented the city on the disposal of the residuals. They informed us the person that handled it for the city had been transferred to the Arizona office, and they reached out to Jim Lavelle Jim Lavelle did not have a hard copy of the report, but had thought it was on his company computer, which the hard drive crashed. Once we found that out, we hired Data Recovery Services of Phoenix to restore the hard drive. Jim Lavelle, as well as our IT staff, went through the 30-some thousand files and did not find the report. Concurrently, during this effort, we contacted ACZ Labs. They did not have a copy of the report. Finally, we reached out to Arcadis, who did the 2014 study. They never received it as part of their work. And also, we contacted Waste Management, the company that received the 2010 residuals, and they don't even require it. So I'm sorry to say, as of today, we do not have the 2010 ACZ report.
Thank you. Yeah, you want to do questions on this topic while we have staff sources here? Councilmember Olson.
So you said that the waste company that you're talking to said they don't even require the report, and why is that?
That report covers everything, inorganics, organics. They're more focused on the radioactivity.
So they had sufficient information. Can we assume they had sufficient information to dispose of what they thought was, that it was okay to, they weren't worried about it?
Yes, they did have sufficient information.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Brennan, my understanding is that although the report itself, the physical report is missing, that the data from the report we have, is that correct?
We have what was submitted to the state, and that was the radioactivity side. The inorganics and stuff like that is not included. But yes, it is summarized in a letter to the state for approval.
And that letter from the state was from us?
CDM.
Okay. So we do have some third-party verification of some of the data that was contained in that report. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes.
Okay.
We have all along, right?
Yes. I mean,
We've
that's
had
been
that all
that's been
along.
the status quo. Yes, that has been the
I
status
just
quo.
want people to know that.
Yeah, but again, I was just trying to verify that information. Any further questions regarding this issue? Seeing none, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry. I wasn't sure if this was Choice or Councilmember Barentine.
When was the last time that Waste Management disposed of any of the sludge?
I'm not sure if they received the 2011. It was either Foothills or Midway landfill. After that, they've all gone out to Clean Harbors.
When was the last time that either of those organizations removed any of the residuals?
Foothills and Midway, 2011.
Okay. So Waste Management didn't necessarily need that, but I appreciate the information. Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate both of your comments regarding this issue this evening. Obviously, a little bit disappointing. Having this report, I think, would go a long ways in dealing with this issue. I guess we'll try to have some conversations about additional strategies. If there's anything else we can do, I don't know if we've reached the end of the road on trying to find or generate this data, or if there is another avenue to be pursued. Do we know the answer to that quite yet, or not yet?
No.
Okay, fair enough. Perhaps in a couple of weeks we can get an update there on what we might be able to do. Mr. Keck.
Yeah, Mayor, again, I think staff has gone extraordinary lengths to try to determine where this report is, including going through all files. I know Mr. Brennan just represented that they looked through files that may have contained the report, but efforts have gone to see if it was appended to another document somehow or accidentally, and that report has not been found. What is transpiring currently with Integral Engineering, whom the council has contracted with, is to go through and do a study. They've received all the data that we've got as well, and I don't want to speak for Mr. Brennan, but they seem, from his report to me, that they were satisfied that they could utilize the data that we've given them to actually run the requisite studies. Is that not accurate, sir?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So those studies will be run as intended. So the ResRad that's been asked for by the citizenry will be run with the data that we have. So again, we're in a, I don't know the timeline from that particular process or project, but that will be moving forward.
Thank you. Councilmember Barentine, did you have another question regarding this?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was trying to write some note down and then.
No problem. We can come back to you under choice here in just a minute. Thank you, Mr. Brennan.
Oh, I remembered. Sorry. Do we still have legal action pending on all of this then?
We've received a notice of claim, yes, on this particular matter related to residuals.
All right.
But it hasn't moved forward to litigation yet, but the notice of claim is pending.
And part of that was the outcome of whether this report showed up or not.
Correct. It was related to the residual disposal, belief that there's a rational nexus between the city's lack of disposal for 2 years and people's health, as well as the core request for the document, the 2010 ACZ report.
Thank you. Councilmember Olson.
And we still have the review going on from the folks that we contracted with that are going to do this in sort of an investigation of the whole thing and try and lay out what all has happened. So that's going on as well.
That is correct. That is ongoing, and the kickoff, well, Mr. Brennan can relay that information.
Yes. We had the kickoff meeting last week, and we're in the process right now of assembling all the data that they've requested.
Great. Thank you.
Just one quick
Glad to hear that's moving forward. Councilmember Barentine.
I didn't think that the RFP included an investigation into this issue, that the citizens had only the process and that. Are we including that? Because I didn't think that was included.
No, there's some terminology that needs to be clarified here. The role of integral engineering was really threefold. Number one was to obviously look at the data that we do have since its inception of the 2007 TNORM guidance and actually indicate through running the ResRads if, in fact, that was deleterious to the health of our plant workers as well as the residents. Secondarily, they were to look at our treatment process that we actually utilize today and see if, in fact, there were aspects that could be enhanced or improved, because we've heard from residents stating that they are concerned that the treatment process may be harmful to health. And then thirdly, their process was to look at our processes and tell us if, in fact, there is a better process, if there's a different, instead of using flocculation and sedimentation, could you use some bioreactor membranes or some other technology to remove the solids from our water and dispose of them differently?
Right, which I agree with, but I thought you made it pretty clear that this was not an investigation.
I apologize. I think I used the wrong word, investigation.
Well, I think
analysis is better for the public to know that's what's going on, not an investigation.
Yeah, I just think that would mislead them.
Thank you, Counselor, for the clarification. That's exactly right. It's an thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Brennan.
Thank you.
And to Mr. Brockhausen, Mrs. Walker, thank you for coming and speaking tonight about the Title VII issue. Obviously, we are moving forward to public hearing on this issue. I do understand your statements. However, I'd encourage you to remain diligent. Obviously, the public hearing is the biggest date that we've had on this issue thus far. And we'll really, after that date, we'll give council the first real bite at the apple of dealing with this issue, besides the motion to put a moratorium on it without a lot of information that's provided to council. But hopefully we can move forward on that issue soon as well. Councilmember Martinez.
Yes, to kind of echo what the mayor just said, to Mr. Brockhausen and Ms. Walker, thank you for coming and sharing and being very diligent and always coming back. I think we're all unified in the desire to have no more victims, so hopefully we can figure out a way to work together to kind of make that a real priority for us. So thank you for sharing all the information. Student art, I, again, just want to reiterate, love working on that, and thanks to the parents and the teachers and all the students for sharing their love of art. KEB, I was able to go to the kind of right along with the group to look at the houses, and there we found a lot of them that were not that were decorated but that did not sign up for this. So hopefully we can do a little bit more next year to get more folks involved in that fun event. And the Friends of Diversity, thank you so much. I've been watching this conversation on Nextdoor, and I really value and appreciate what you are doing, and I love that there's so much enthusiasm and so many people already signed up to kind of look at these issues. So thank you for coming tonight, and thank you for doing the work that you're doing, and I'm supportive, and I'm here to help however I can. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Olson?
Thank you. And Councilmember Martinez said a lot of the things in terms of thanking others, but I did want to point out the Friends of Diversity folks, and I appreciate your coming and the work that you've done and some of the background that you gave us tonight. I, too, would really like to have a conversation about this to see what our place could be. I'm very supportive of some of the things that you've put forward. I'm not sure that as a council we'll get there together, but I certainly welcome the conversation because I think it's an important one to have. In terms of a couple things that were perhaps not said, I appreciate the comments about victims of sexual assault and victimization, re-victimizing people, and I hope that those here tonight that have been so supportive of a change in the distancing also realize that most likely, at least my perspective would be, that on the night of the public hearing, I doubt that very many, if any, victims will come because it's such a painful revisiting of that, and so hopefully we'll all be strong in being a voice and listening to folks that we know have personally had that experience. I totally agree with Councilmember Martinez. Our goal here is to make it safer for everybody all the way around. And distancing at the level that we're at right now, I think we all agreed last week was too much at this point. And the way the city needs to handle it this way going forward is to look at some other options. So what we put forward, I think, was a possibility of creating more space, more place to welcome all people into our community. And that's my goal, too. So I do hope that equating not getting it right isn't the same as you're not listening, because I think we're listening, and we wouldn't be where we are tonight if we weren't listening. And you've helped in that. It's just that we're not going to always agree on the exactness, and sometimes compromise is going to be more important than not to get somewhere at all together. And that's my goal here, is to find some way we can find a middle ground to make it best for all people all the way around. In the public hearing, for those of you that are new here tonight, make sure you let people know we're having a public hearing on sex offender distancing, so it's important to get people to come and give their perspective, because we'll be listening that night too. And I think that's it till council. Oh, yeah. We will talk at the end then, and council request about the Friends of Diversity. Is that what the plan is?
I think so.
So they have to wait till the very end if we're going to have this conversation with them in the room.
Sure. Okay. I mean, we could take it up right this moment. I just feel like it'd be appropriate to take it up under choice to discuss if that's something we should be discussing further or not. Councilmember Bernstein.
To the Friends of Diversity, hi. Appreciated that some of you took the time to talk to me. I greatly appreciate some of the issues you're trying to resolve, and also your understanding and tolerance with some of the issues the city has to resolve too, as we have recently had issues come up about purposely advising the police not to enforce the law. So we'll have to have that as part of our conversation in this as well. I greatly appreciate the people decorating Inglewood. I wish more of them would come and get their awards. And the art was, as always, stellar. It's nice to go through the calendar as they're doing that. Colleen, I appreciate that you are getting better and better at writing and presenting. I don't know if you're using us as a way to just do some kind of almost online course. It's interesting and it's getting better. I hope that you pony up a little with the Friends of Diversity people and be a little bit more tolerant of us occasionally. I think people just get passionate about what they're doing sometimes, and they let it get away from them. And I take it with a grain of salt, at least for when I'm seeing it, and I know people are passionate about what they do sometimes, so we'll try to be a little easy on everybody, me included. So I appreciate what you were saying, though, and I will certainly take it to heart and make sure that I am not an offender as well. Brian, I appreciate that you remind us that you are a victim and as well, and I'm sorry that the way things went on later after that, but and how you handled that. I understand that you are regretful for the situation as well. You have put yourself out there as the face of this whole thing for 100 people that are in this community that are facing an issue with this. Susan, you're correct. Linda Olson did state that that she did not believe the papers that you provided were sufficient. And so I'm not sure that there's any research for anything that comes conclusive to guarantee us anything, but I have not found a thing that gives any information, gives me any reason that any footage is going to keep anybody safe, including victims groups. So if we could please pursue this other woman, if she will give some more research, then please give the information to the city and see if that's something we're willing to pursue. We're not going to be doing this until February. And if there's some other information that's more conclusive, in July or August, when I asked to do a moratorium on the Title VII, what I asked for was a moratorium on only the grandfathered. I, at that time, was not even close to wanting to get rid of Ordinance 34. However, in the pursuing 6 months since then, in the plethora of research and people that I've talked to and people in the community that have come to my meetings and talked to this, I'm headed that way. So if there is some more information that you could provide that you believe that we are without, that might make a difference to stop this, that even 2 feet of information is still not conclusive enough. If there's somebody else out there that's more studied or researched in it, then I would greatly like to have it. If it costs something, then at least let me have the information personally, and I can make a decision on how I can get some of that or what we're doing with this, because I'm very concerned about this. There's 100 people in our community, and we are outliers in having an ordinance like this. And I cannot, as desperate as I try, cannot find anything that says that we are keeping anybody safe. So if you'd help me with it, I'd appreciate it. And Tom Brennan, thank you very much I'm sorry that Ms. Bailey was not here for her presentation, but thank you for the work that you've done on getting the information, and I guess we'll all see it pan out.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 8, that's communications, proclamations, and appointments. No items this evening. We'll move on to agenda item 9. That's the consent agenda items. I would entertain a motion at this time.
Mayor, move we approve consent agenda items 9A, 1 and 2, B, 1 and 2.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Any comments? Councilmember Valentine?
No, I was just going to tease you and go, I'm not pulling anything out of the consent.
We've had a string of pulls, so we, looks like no comments this evening.
One more for the end of the year.
I'll ask you to please vote.
All votes have been cast. The record shows 6 ayes.
We'll move on to agenda item 10, no public hearing items this evening. So we'll move on to agenda item 11, ordinances, resolutions, and motions. Under B, approval of ordinances on second reading, we do have 11B1, Council Bill 51, a bill for an ordinance authorizing supplemental mill levy for the 2017 general obligation bonds. Our staff source is Director of Finance and Administrative Services, Kathleen Rinkle. Good evening, Director Rinkle.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. This is second reading for the mill levy that will support the principal and interest bond payments that we're expecting once we sell the bonds in springtime. So I don't know, since I missed last meeting, if there were any questions or if there's any additional questions I can answer.
Thank you. Any questions from council? Seeing none, I entertain a motion.
So moved.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. Comments? Councilmember Olson?
I'm just going to say it's good to see you back.
Well, thank you. It's
That's
good to
all.
be back.
That's all.
Yes, thank you. Seeing no further comments, please vote.
All votes have been cast. The record shows 6 ayes.
Okay, we're going to move on to 11C1, this resolutions and motions. Under 11C1, we have staff recommendation for council to approve by motion a professional services contract for project design and construction management with OV Consulting. Our staff source is Planner 2, John Vobrel. Good evening, Mr. Vobrel.
Good evening, Mayor Jefferson and council members. I'm here this evening to ask for a motion to approve a contract for professional services for the Inglewood Safe Routes to School project for design and construction management services. As I outlined in my council communication, We only received one proposal for this RFP. However, we got the proposal from the best outfit that I believe is here in the metro area for this kind of project, and has a long history with Inglewood in delivering some stellar projects, including the Inglewood Walk and Wheel Master Plan, as well as the 2012 bicycle signage program that we did back then. That was a very tough project, and Chris Vogelsang rode the contractor very hard to get that project done right. I was not really surprised that we only got one response, and the reason why is because this is a fairly a small project in terms of money. Typically, consultants like to go after projects that are more like $75,000. This is more like at about low 50s. It's also a very complicated project in the fact that it requires a number of skill sets that most people don't have all of those. So and OV Consulting realized that and decided to put together a team that would put together those skill sets. So on this team, we have OV Consulting leading, and we also they're partnered with Goodby and Associates, and as well as BLN Consulting. There are 4 tasks in this project. The first task involves environmental compliance documentation. This is a CDOT type project, and CDOT requires a lot of different documentation on environmental issues. We are somewhat lucky in the fact that CDOT felt a little bit sorry for us. They couldn't fully fund the project, so they offered to defederalize this project. And what that means is that they substitute federal dollars for state dollars, and that comes with less requirements. So we were able to negotiate with OV Consulting to bring that task a little bit down in price. That task will go through January through March. The second task will be survey work. That's fairly simple. That will be January into February. Task 3 will be preliminary and final design. This will run through February through mid-May. And then Task 4 is also another little bit different thing in terms of its bid procurement and construction oversight. And quite truthfully, a lot of consultants really don't want to deal with that headache. But Chris Vogelsang, he actually kind of enjoys it. So that will go through July through October. And at this time, I would love to take any questions that you have.
Thank you. Questions from council? Seeing none. Oh, Councilmember Russell. Sorry, you recovered.
How much grant monies were we awarded for this project?
I don't have that figure. I just don't have that figure in my head right now.
Okay, so is this $51,340, is that coming out of the budget, or is that coming out of the grant monies that we were awarded?
It would come out of both, actually. So, of course, we had to do a match, and it was, as I believe, it was 40 to 45% city money and 55% CDOT money. And so they will come out at those percentages.
Okay.
This particular part of the project, and it was included in the entire project budget.
Okay. So has this been budgeted for, this $51,000?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Valentine?
Could you just make sure at some point as a council request to just go ahead and provide that information so that it's all in one area for us? The amount of the grants and what, okay.
Sure. I will do that.
Thanks.
Thank you. I think that type of information might be helpful under the financial impact. I saw you guys filled out the financial impact portion and, sharing the scope of the contract and the cost of the contract, but perhaps when a grant's involved, that split information might be helpful for us.
More detail.
Appreciate it. Well, just, what the exact split is as far as, what portion we're funding and versus what portion other agencies are funding. Councilmember Rolston.
I appreciate that you went after or renegotiated some of this to go down another 9,000 or so, right? Is that what it is?
8740.
So was that totally from the removing of the federal to the state, or was it they give and take on some other things too?
Also in the survey, we challenged that number as well, and Chris went out and got a more accurate, detailed,
Comparison.
stronger quote for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that due diligence.
Other questions from council? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
Moved.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Further discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Vote's been cast. Record show 6 ayes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you. Moving on to 11C2, this is staff recommendation for council to approve by motion the agreement for underwriting services to be provided by Stiefel. Staff Sources Finance and Administrative Services Director Kathleen Wrinkle. Welcome back, Director Wrinkle.
Thank you. So this is staff recommending the approval of the agreement for the underwriting services. This is common services for selling the bond. What they do is they help us prepare with rating agencies, documents, and so forth, and coordinate the sale. So what we did was we did an RFP, which was not necessarily required for professional services, but since we knew we had a lot of those types of services out there, we wanted to get the best value for the city. I want to apologize that that documentation wasn't originally included with this. In my absence, it got missed, but it is on your desk right there as the package. Those are the supporting documents for the RFP. We had 13 people that we invited, or firms, I should say, to the RFP. We had 9 of them respond, and of those, once we went through the initial review of the responses, we invited 5 of them back for a little more detailed interview. The interview questions are in your packet. Financial impact is, I would say, pretty much average for the costs that underwriters charge. With the cost of the prep and coordination services, about $101,000, and the additional expenses we cover for them are typical, around $15,000. When you take a look at the total cost of those services and expenses against the $27 million that we would look at going for, it's only 0.43% of the total cost. Now, we do have some expenses of our own, somewhere between $50,000 and $65,000, that will be for payments that we make to the credit agencies to do the reviews, travel, some legal fees, and other associated miscellaneous types expenses. Altogether, including that and the underwriting expenses, we're looking at just a touch over 0.5%, 0.6% of the total of the money that we will be looking to fund the headquarters building. All of these costs come out of the bond, so it's not budgeted, but it is part of the normal process of how you fund bonding. Any questions?
Any questions? Councilmember Russell?
Will the expenses be in addition to the bond? Let's say we do borrow the full $27 million, then all the expenses would be over and above that, so it would be in excess of $27 million that we would.
And then we can structure the transaction 2 different ways. We could say, okay, we're going to fund a total of $27 million and we'll take this out of it, or we can say we need $27 million plus these expenses. So we have options.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Barrington?
Will all of the supporting documentation that we had tonight that got overlooked from our packet be put into the material for this meeting?
Yes, absolutely. I've given it to the clerk already.
Okay.
Thank you. Further questions? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Further discussion? Seeing none, Councilmember Martinez.
I just found a really silly little typo in here. Under the regulatory disclosure, there's at the start of the second sentence, it's supposed to say some, and that S is 5. It's just a really small little typo.
Thank you.
My editor eyes never turn off, so when I read that, I was like,
Is that in the
that's a
actual
5.
agreement itself?
Yeah, but where is it?
Is that in the actual agreement itself?
Page 2.
Yeah, so it's on, if you're looking at the full PDF, it's on page 78.
Okay, that's
Is it page 2 in the actual, on the bottom of the page of that one?
It is on page, yeah, it's on page 2 of that, second sentence.
We will get that corrected
Comer,
before
do we need
signature.
a motion for that, or is that?
It's in the actual contract.
Yes.
Then you approve the contract with the change.
There you go.
So-
Whose motion was it? Mayor Pro Tem Gillette, I suppose, can make that amendment to his motion.
Yes, as amended. And then we'll amend the original, and we can have both parties initial that amendment.
Okay. So Mr. Mayor Pro Tem's motion will include that change to that 5-2S. Further comments? Seeing none, please vote.
All votes have been cast. The record shows 6 ayes.
Great, excellent. Moving on to agenda item 12, general discussion. Councilmember Choice, would anybody like to kick us off? Mayor Pro Tem Gillette, can I ask you to kick us off on member choice, sir?
Again, I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. Regarding our citizens that are here for Friends of Diversity, I would ask this council not take on the issue of Sanctuary City until we find out what the DOJ is going to do about that. I know we have some discussion already at D.C. On this issue, and honestly, before we do anything, let's find out what's settled and what's going to go on. I don't think we have this issue here to begin with. Number one, I've not heard any overwhelming evidence that we're not open to everybody as we are right now. So it's no pressing issue, but I know that. The incoming president-elect has said he would be addressing this, and in fact, that's why I know some communities are wanting to, put this on before us because they're concerned about what may happen. But we as a city, we are subject to some federal funding, through projects, grants that we get. I just want to make sure before we do anything, even have the discussion, we know where Washington's at on this and what the impact would be to us. And then we've always been an inclusive city. I don't see any signs that say certain people aren't allowed here. And it's one of the things we love about our city. So I don't see a major issue. So maybe this could be something we look at later in the summer. It'd be a great issue to see what happens for those of us going to National League of Cities as well.
Could I just ask the Mayor Pro Tem a quick question? I'm not sure I heard you correct. You said that it had been an issue addressed when you went to National League of Cities this last time.
No, I have a feeling it's going to come up on the
one
coming up in March.
All right, thank you.
So if we could wait to find out what kind of, because usually in NLC they kind of let us know the things that may be coming down that cities have to address. This may or may not be one of them, but I'd like to wait until afterwards.
I understand better, thank you.
That's and the only other thing I have is Rita, Steve, and I went to the police awards ceremony, and I really wish more council could have been there. I know we work, I've missed things for work, but to hear what our police officers have done, it is so humbling to hear how they put their lives at risk and how they save other people's lives. And I know there are people who, who complain about the police, and I know that happens, but I've taken a lot of time to ride with a lot of these folks personally and spend, 10 hours in a car with them and see what they do and how they handle the public. I've been nothing but impressed. And then to hear these people get these amazing awards for heroic efforts that, they're like me. I wake up in the morning, I want to go to sleep again at night. I'd like to have that in between very safe. And they have a job where their in between's not so safe. And these gentlemen and ladies do a great job for us, and I wanted to thank them. So for those of you who didn't make it, if you could try to go maybe next year, they really appreciate council members there. And so that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Martinez?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you again to the Friends and Diversity folks. I would like to at least keep talking about this in however we decide we're most comfortable talking about this stuff. I know the City of Westminster has an inclusivity board and commission. I know they're doing great work. I don't know if that's something we want to talk about, but I would love to hear more from your group as you kind of flesh things out and decide kind of what issues you want to work on. So I would love to keep hearing from you and love for our council to talk about ways that we can help you and ways that we can policies that we can include or enact to make our city more inclusive. And that's all for me.
Thank you. Councilmember Olson? Olson. Sorry, I'm just going to go down the line here.
I have a couple things. I wanted to know if there was a date that's been set for the planning and zoning to look at the comp plan. I know that they didn't have a meeting this week. Is there a date been set?
Yeah, they are going to be taking this matter up on January 4th, which is a Wednesday.
Excellent.
Yes. So they have that on their agenda for the Wednesday the 4th to examine the changes that the council has looked at.
That's great. And then I wanted to ask the mayor, what is the state of the city event the state of the city event? Yeah, what's the state of the city event? And why haven't we talked about it as a council, or what's going on with this?
Sure.
We haven't really had a conversation.
The State of the City event is something that I'm kind of envisioning us having a little more robust conversation about when the communication contract comes forward for approval. Part of the RFP for communications included State of the City. If you recall, I know we haven't had a lot of conversations about it, but, I have expressed my desire to have this event and my desire to try to get some support regarding the event. I think it really, for me, is just about communications and trying to provide points of pride for our community and hope for the future, and let them know what we've been up to and where we're heading.
Have you been planning it already? Are there things that have been in the works already?
Yeah.
Can you give us
as far as, yeah, sure. I mean, I've worked with the city manager's office in tentatively scheduling a date and working with our communications department to try to define what the scope of work will be on the communications contract and what that'll leave remaining as far as work that needs to be done on it.
So I'm not in favor of it. What I want to do is be a part of it as a council. I wouldn't want it just to be a one-person council.
Oh, amen. I would hope that I can get support from everybody, and I'd love to discuss this. I mean, if you have more specific questions, I'm happy to answer
I don't know what to ask questions on. So you have stuff already drawn up, and you have a date you're thinking about already?
I don't know what you mean by drawn up. I mean, I've got a tentative date in mind.
Okay, when is that?
I'd rather not disclose that until I know whether or not that's going to actually happen or not. Okay. But it's a date in February. I want to have it in the first quarter. And so
will we not be a part of picking the date together, or is it just going to be?
Yeah, again, I just don't want to publicly announce it and say it's going to be this date in case we need to make some adjustments until we know of that date. I'm happy to tell you what date I'm thinking about. I would just prefer to do it, in a less public forum until I know what date we have. Does that make sense?
Not totally, but if that's the way you want to do
What's
it,
your
I guess.
concern with that?
Well, I think we usually have picked dates together. We've usually thrown out a number of dates and said those would work, those wouldn't, and then the two of you usually go back and pick one that's the best for the city. That's all I'm asking. I don't want to be out of town or having something else that conflicts, and then all of a sudden have to say I can't go to that either.
Yeah, I mean, again, offline,
Maybe
I'll
you can
share
just come
this date
together
with
dates and let us know at the next one, or?
Yeah, fair enough. Hey, fine. I'll share the date. So basically, what I've been doing is my monthly meetings on the last Wednesday of the month. Mm-hmm. I found that is a date that works very well. We don't have board and commission events that evening and that kind of thing. And I view the core audience of this as both our residents who are engaged in our community as well as the local business community. So I want to get as much involvement as I can with them. So the tentative date that we have scheduled out there is February 22nd. We've checked with our facilities director to ensure that the city center itself facilities are available, and we've put in a temporary hold on that date until we can nail down what we want to do.
Again, I would just like to have been a part of the process. I don't know if others are feeling the same way. Yes, I see some heads nodding. I just think usually we do those things together.
Sure, and this is a first-time process. I hope you understand. I mean, I'm not trying to hide the ball from anyone or not include anyone. Again, I want this to be a community-wide event. I want this to be something that all council members can come and help support. And so, please, I'm an open book. Ask me more questions. Please engage me on this issue. I've asked for that in the past, and I'm asking for it again. So feel free to ask questions or engage me.
That's what I'm doing. That's all I'm
what
doing.
Else would you like from me, I guess, at this time? Others are nodding their heads.
Maybe,
what would they like?
I don't know, maybe we set up a time to have a conversation about what the event should look like. In the past, we used to plan that panel, what should be there that morning of the businesses.
We've never had a State of the City event.
No, but that's the norm of what we've done when we've had an event that's been city council sponsored. Unless this is something different than that, I don't know. I don't know what.
Yeah, can you address your concerns or questions or anything of that nature for this moment? Again, my consideration was that this was going to be come forward during the approval of the communications contract, because this is part of the scope of that contract, and that should be coming forward. Mr. Keck, can you give me a reminder?
Yeah, 3 January.
Thank you.
I think that my feeling on this is it's odd for someone who's not a strong mayor to have a State of the City address. It's usually the person who's in charge of the city should have the city address, which is our city manager. We are a council of, people that have the city manager as our employee, but that generally is, the budget and the fiscal wellness of our cities. Ultimately, the city manager's job as a mayor elected by council, it is a little different to say that you're in charge because the president doesn't have someone else.
Are you suggesting that I not hold a State of the City event?
I think it's odd. I was hoping we would not have this discussion openly, that we could. But
again, I've asked for engagement. I'm happy to have private conversations about this. I'm happy to address any questions you'd like to have addressed at this moment. You're the one steering this conversation.
I think it's great that we talk about the budget, which we do openly all the time. But ultimately, I think it's our city manager's responsibility to give how the fiscal wellness of our city.
And I disagree. I mean, again, I think, as the mayor of our city, I'm trying to represent and provide vision for the community.
You don't run the city. He runs the city.
And I'm not suggesting I run the city. Again, I'm the lead representative of a policy-making body for this community. I don't think it's that uncommon.
You just asked for my opinion.
And I'm giving you mine, sir. And, again, I just don't think it's that uncommon. Again, my thought is we can continue this discussion under the January 3rd portion. And candidly, again, I'm asking for your support, not for your permission. Councilmember Martinez?
I agree with Councilmember Olson. I would just like to be a little bit more involved and part of the discussion. I would like to know, kind of what the goal is, what we're planning to do. I really know nothing about this, so it would be good to be in the know.
Sure. And again, are you satisfied with that we'll be discussing this on January 3rd, talking about the scope of what the work will be? And, I'm happy to provide, if you have some more general questions, I'm happy to answer those. Again, the vision is a gathering of residents and business folks who are representatives in our community to, again, give them an update on where we are, where we're going, and give some points of community pride and hope for our future. Anything else?
I guess I would just like to know a little bit more, and I would like to have a discussion, if it has to be in the discussion in the realm of that scope of that work, that's fine. It just seems like a really important thing that we should discuss as a group.
And again, I feel like, we're happy to have that discussion, and my thought is let's have that discussion on the 3rd, and then if we feel like we need further discussion, we can happy to have that at that time. Unless somebody wants to make a different recommendation. Councilmember Barentine.
Can I
wouldn't mind,
continue
Councilmember
with
Barentine
mine,
is going to weigh in on this issue quickly.
Okay, that's fine. And I'm not.
Since you've asked for feedback, I'll come back to you.
Unless you just want that side.
No, I want everybody. Come on in. Water's fine.
This has been discussed ever since we got on council that he wanted to do this. He wanted to switch over the time with the citizen to be able to do this. He's been talking and partnering with our city manager in order to make this happen. And the comment that this would only be done by a strong mayor system, I think, was maybe a little unnecessary. I think he's asked for our reach. He's outreached to us numerous times asking us to participate in this. And everybody before just said, fine. He's the mayor. I don't believe making blanket statements that the city manager runs the city. Does not. We have elected officials for a reason. And I'm not diminishing your job. It's extremely important. But we hire you, as well. I don't want the citizens to think we've just handed over our obligations, our responsibility, our job to somebody else either. Because trust me, when it hits the fan, you want it pointed at the right direction. Let us take the responsibility we're supposed to. Because we're supposed to direct and guide that. And I think it's very important to have that feedback from the position of mayor. They do a similar thing in Littleton, even though they appoint theirs as well, even though that isn't an elected mayor position. And I'm kind of dumbfounded by this entire conversation. I think it would be worthwhile, and if all of a sudden there's an interest, Mayor, to get some more involvement here, I've always been willing. I'll help with that too. I just thought that was the process we were taking. I've certainly, I don't want to speak for anybody else, sorry, Reed, but I know that we've been asking for a lot more participation on some of the financial issues, which you've addressed at the mayor meeting, that we're going to be tackling this year, and the city manager has agreed as well that we're going to be looking at the financial issues a lot sooner and a lot more in depth as we're going through. So I think that will take care of some of that. I certainly have been in support of you doing this. I wasn't in support of you switching with me for the Inglewood Citizen thing. I grant you, maybe I didn't support that, sorry. But we've heard about this for months, so this kind of surprises if you've just flung it on us is a little odd. So if we could just have a process and figure out what you're doing with this more, if people feel that it's different than what has been discussed, then we can go there. But I'm just dumbfounded with this conversation. It's a little out of left field.
That's helpful.
Thank you. Any further comments on this issue? Coming back to Councilmember Rolson.
Great. So let me clarify. And perhaps this has to do with who's been on council, at least for Rick and I, for the last several years. Whenever we had events like this, we actually talked about it together as a group. And we have said, yeah, let's do a State of the City thing.
We've never had a State of the City. What do you mean?
Past events that we have done together, like the business
Very different.
morning, it is different. But we did agree that we wanted to do some kind of a State of the City. But I thought when I said that, I thought it was a we, not an I. And so that's all I was asking for.
It's a very big we, ma'am. I'd love to have your involvement
exactly.
and your support.
So all I was
let's do it together.
So all I was asking for was information.
I've given it.
And okay, you sound incredibly defensive, and I don't want to make you defensive.
I'm not trying to be defensive. I'm answering all of your questions. Why don't you finish your comments?
I would just like to have us involved in a conversation about it, so we
Yes,
all
ma'am.
feel like we're a part of it.
January 3rd, we will have that, and we will have
my
it
goodness.
more
Okay,
if we
great.
would like to.
Good, thank you. Then on to the Friends of Diversity. I'm supportive of most of what you say in here. What I'm not sure of is how a city goes about doing this without becoming somewhat of in the limelight for ways we don't want to be in trying to execute what is in here that I find really good and support personally. So I've talked to some folks from other cities that are trying to figure this out as well, and some of them have said, we've decided not to make a statement on anything and just go about doing what we claim here, which is a sorry state that when you feel like you want to do something and you can't, you might get bullied or whatever for it. So, but I'm with you on it in many ways. I just don't know how it works out, so I don't know what to tell you. And I'd love to talk to you afterwards because I'd like to be one of your, 70-something members. So thank you for caring about our city in that way. Last thing is just happy holidays. And I hope I didn't, happy holidays.
Thank you. Councilmember Barentine?
I appreciate you guys coming out. Again, the issue is going to be what Mayor Pro Tem Gillett brought up about where the direction is going and how this is going to look. We've got 100 people in this community that wish we would make a statement about being willing to go ahead and not enforce the law. And we've already had several public statements made on getting into the weeds on that. So that's something we're going to have to get some additional information on once you find out what's going on at National League of Cities. I don't know. I don't attend that, but Mayor Pro Tem will probably again this year and can come back and give us some information on that. But I do appreciate what you guys are doing, and I appreciate the other events that you have had, and appreciate what you guys are doing in my neighborhood. And so certainly I hope that it's, nobody agrees on everything. I guess that's what diversity is all about. So I'm certainly there in support of a lot of what you're doing, but I need to get a little bit more information on this as well until we kind of dive into what looks more like political waters than maybe we can handle here. So thank you very much, and Merry Christmas to everybody.
Thank you. Councilmember Russell?
I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight, and I know most of them are gone. I do appreciate you coming out and speaking up, and I tend to agree with
Mayor Pro Tem Gillett, that we need to wait and see. And I also agree with Councilmember Barentine that we've had some issues that people have been speaking on for 6 months, and we haven't been able to come to a conclusion on that yet either. So, but thank you for coming out. I do want to say I attended the police banquet also, and it was an amazing banquet, and I just thank you, Commander Watson, is that correct? And I was really impressed, too, by the heroic things that a lot of the police officers have done in our city, and I'm very thankful that we have a police department that is watching out for us. I have a couple of questions on this. This did come up at the mayor's meeting last week, and that I actually agreed with Mr. Comer's assessment of wanting a public hearing rather than writing an ordinance first, because I felt the consensus was on finding out what the people in the community want before we went ahead and wrote another ordinance on distancing. So that's the way I would like to move forward.
Councilmember Russell, if you don't mind if we take up that issue momentarily? There was some brief discussion at the mayor-manager meeting regarding what the consensus of council was and what to bring forward at the public hearing. So I guess my first question is to Mr. Comer. Can we have a public hearing on a more generalized question rather than a specific ordinance that would amend our current policy?
I don't think anything prevents you from doing so.
Thank you. So now I'll ask this body if, that consensus is to, again, I think two options now we're talking about. One is to bring forward the 1,000, as I thought we had come to some consensus. So that would be an ordinance amending our current policy to the 1,000 distancing. The alternative to that is to have a more open-ended public hearing regarding this policy more generally. And again, my understanding at the study session was that we gained consensus to bring forward the 1,000 ordinance amending the current policy. Would others like to weigh in on which direction we'd like to go? Councilmember Barentine.
Well, if the intent is to get more information from the public, then I would assume that we were talking more about a public forum. If it's just to do an ordinance to change the footage, and we don't really have anything that shows that the 2,000 versus 1,000 versus 25 feet makes any difference in keeping anybody any safer, and the lawsuit will still happen, then what's the point? I mean, it won't change anything. The lawsuit will still happen if there's any restriction on there. So I don't understand if we're not going to sincerely go out and ask the public what their opinion is before we're doing yet another ordinance and pushing something forward that makes it look like we've already agreed to something, which is what the citizens complain about. So I would be in favor of trying to just truly get their information, like a public forum, and see because if I've been misreading this, if all the people I've been talking to are not what this community wants, I would want to know that. And then I would take a much different stand on this. So, but if we go and say 1,000 feet, then I'm not sure that we're really asking anybody's opinion as much as we are just putting another statement out there. I don't know what's come already.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Gillett.
I'm trying to think of what is the best process for this, because we hear about process all the time. And I think there's a difference between a community forum, which we can hold any night, and then invite anybody to, versus a public hearing. If we're going to call it a public hearing, then we need to have a motion, a first reading, a motion to go into public hearing, and then we need to have a second reading on it. And if that's what we're going to do, then I'm going to suggest that since we had consensus on the 1,000, that we bring a motion forward to amend our ordinance, Title VII, and Title VII to be 1,000, and we can announce our public hearing, and then we can move forward in a formal matter, make sure the public is formally invited, that all media print can be formally announced on what we're doing, and we can have it as a formal process as possible. I'm just too worried that the willy-nilly just having it in different places and not having it all together in one place in a formal setting, I think we're going to get ourselves in trouble. So my preference is that we address it as an ordinance, and we have a public hearing on that ordinance, and then we have a second reading, and then we're done.
Thank you. Councilmember Wilson.
I agree with that. I thought that's what we decided on the last time we met, so I don't know what the confusion was. I can see how maybe someone would like it to be different than that, but I think it's easier for the citizens to know this is what we're looking at. I mean, that's where I think we found some consensus amongst us on what spacing we'd be willing to agree to on this, going from 0 to 2,000, of which it currently is. So I think that's a helpful way to do it, to say, okay, well, we're looking at 1,000 now. And it's 1,000 and 1,000, isn't it? It's not 1,500, yeah. And then the other thing is that none of the research that we did see actually said that spacing at a lower level hurts it one way or the other. None of it says equivocally that spacing is totally a waste of time. Matter of fact, several included in their research that small amounts could be helpful for a number of reasons, and they don't always favor the offender. They favor victims and sense of self and some sort of action on the part of a city or jurisdiction to take some action to help prevent, even though it's not the only factor that helps people prevent. I also want to just say that this is not just about a lawsuit. This is not about one case. It's not about one person who's been coming here or a second person who's been coming here all the time. This is about our whole community and everybody's involvement in helping make a decision. And so I think it would be much clearer to say what we're looking at, let community come out and say, hate that, just do away with it all, or go back to 2,000 or whatever. And it allows for any other experts that we want to bring in. I'm not at all. I think if we want to bring Mrs. Levinson in, Dr. Levinson, I think it's Jill Levinson, is in that night, that's great. I'm fine with that. So that would be my take on the whole thing.
You'd be supportive of an ordinance? Did I hear
Yes,
that
I
correct?
would.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilmember Martinez, would you like to weigh on this before I go back to others who are already waiting?
Sure, yeah. I would also be supportive of bringing forward the adjustments that we kind of talked about last time and then having a public hearing. I can see the benefit of having a public hearing first, but I think, like Councilmember Gillett brought up, that could be just all over the place. I think it would be more productive if there was something specific that the public hearing would address.
Thank you. And I think I'll be in that same spot. I'm open to the idea of a more generalized, but, again, I heard a fairly clear consensus that night on bringing forward the ordinance of 1,000. I'll continue to support that. Councilmember Barentine?
Listening to what Linda Olson said and Mayor Pro Tem Rick Gillett, I do think that it's probably fair to go ahead and make sure that the citizens know what we're proposing, or to propose something so that they have a way to wrap their heads around and ask questions. I think that it certainly doesn't preclude us from having a public hearing maybe in January, some kind of forum where we can actually have an opportunity for people to come in, know that we've got some experts coming, and maybe this Jill Levinson could come then, where the citizens would have an opportunity to ask questions back and forth. Just like we saw tonight, obviously Susan Walker, who's been in this for 15 years, disagrees with Councilmember Olson's assessment of some of this information, and that would give the citizens an opportunity to go ahead and ask questions back and forth on a very sensitive subject and maybe make them more willing to come out and talk to, see what's going on. At least some of that has been happening at my coffees in my town hall, so maybe that would make it a little bit easier for them, so they would have an idea what we were proposing and what we were thinking of doing in February, and then they could have some information. Maybe we could do something in January, late January, something so that people could be informed, know what council is proposing ahead of time, and then come out and get information from people and find out whether they think this is a good idea or not. And maybe it's going to go the other way. I desperately want to make sure that we hear from the community as much as possible and that they get the information. And if they come to the conclusion like Council Member Olson did, then so be it. but at least that would give them an opportunity to ask some questions without feeling that they're in that public hearing setting where we've already made up our mind and we're already sold on something. So that would work. That's fine with me.
Thank you. Do others support that concept of having a meeting before the public hearing on this issue? It's a new concept that I guess I'll ask for some feedback on. Councilmember, why don't we move on choice to Councilmember Russell, and if others would like to weigh in on this other issue, we can. Councilmember Russell.
I just want to weigh in on that before I finish my council member choice. I actually think that is a great idea. I mean, we did some public forums on the marijuana issue, and I think that something like that could be good in this sense also. So anyway, I think that's a great idea if that's possible. And then we could go ahead with the way it was planned also. So anyway, I would like to do that.
Hearing that, if you don't mind, let's just go ahead and take that issue. I mean, would others like to have that? I mean, my personal opinion is that, you know, the public hearing is the appropriate way to move this thing forward. Do others want to weigh in on whether or not to have some sort of meeting prior to the public hearing? Mayor Pro Tem.
You know, one of the things that a lot of us felt and community felt is that we put our staff in between. This is not staff's issue. I wouldn't want it how we did it last time. I know that they were trying to get a lot of feedback for us and held the different meetings. But one of the concerns was it's our decision. If I want to hold a meeting in my district and you want to hold a meeting, any one of us can hold meetings and get that to do it. But I think the proper formal process of having it, letting them know what we're going to discuss, having it, that's what I would prefer. Because I'm just concerned that the marijuana, and then you have 3 meetings, you have the same people at all 3 meetings saying the same thing. I just didn't see that it was that beneficial. I heard from numerous people saying it was just the same folks at all the meetings saying the same thing, saying the same complaints. So I'd rather have it as a formal process. We're going to make a formal change. We'd have a formal process that we can go back and say, here's what we did, and be. That's my preference.
Anybody else want to weigh in on the idea of a meeting prior to the public hearing?
Can I ask a question?
I'd like to get some consensus on this one quickly and move on.
Do you get a question real quick?
Regarding this issue?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Nothing stops a city council person from having a town hall and having it issue specific then.
No,
okay.
I'm aware.
I desperately want to get the information. So by hook or by crook, I'll try and get the information so that I know I can vote informed. If I can have it, my own town hall, and anybody who wants to join me with it, that would be fine. I'll just do it that way rather than some formal meeting on the basis of council. So we'll work out a date in January to do the town hall here. Community center room.
Thank you. Councilmember Olson.
So you've been doing these already with this as a topic in some of your meetings, haven't you? Because that's how you've been getting information so far, right?
Yes.
You haven't been breaking the law and all that? Okay.
No, I mean, but you guys all apparently started looking at it like as formal. I was just talking about a forum to, have people brought in and do that. But I can do that as a town hall. I'll just do it here. I've been kind of avoiding having my town halls done down here. One, some of my constituents like to have a beer when we're talking. Bob's is a nice place. And two, just for what Mayor Pro Tem said, I didn't want to take up staff time and that, so we try to have it in the community and out in the community. But, I could do that one time for the year, use the community room. That'll be my one time for the year. Maybe, unless something else comes up. All right, so I'll get with you for some in January then.
Thank you. Councilmember Russell, back to you.
Is there going to be a mayor's meeting like tomorrow? Because we're not actually having a study session for 3 weeks.
Correct. And at our last mayor-manager meeting, we did look at the next study session agenda. I was kind of anticipating seeing the agenda for the next meeting pretty much under mayor choice for every meeting moving forward so that we can look at the next meeting and make sure that we're all okay with what's being proposed for the agenda.
So you're going to do that?
Yeah, well, I guess I kind of did it in this last mayor-manager meeting, so I guess we'll pick up that process next week, I guess is my guess.
Speaking about staff time, seriously, would you really want to have that meeting?
Now, when you say next week,
Yes, next year. I mean next year, sir.
you mean
Next
like the
year.
week of January 3rd when we'll bring it up officially the night of January 3rd under Mayor's Choice.
Yeah, I'm saying on January 3rd, under Mayor's Choice, there should be the agenda for the.
I mean, I'm around if you want to meet next
Ninth
week.
or
That's
whatever.
all great, but
He wants to know whether
I
he's
think we're
got
done
2
with.
weeks
I think
off.
we're done with the mayor-manager meetings from here on out, based on the feedback of the council, and we'll be picking those up under Mayor Choice at every meeting moving forward after this one.
In January.
Yep.
Okay.
Starting next year. Councilmember Olson, do you have something on this topic?
Well, not all people register. I didn't say anything about having a public forum. So were we done with that question?
I believe I gained consensus there.
Got enough. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Don't need my point. That's fine.
Yeah. You were supportive of.
I'm either way. I think the more information and education.
Maybe I misunderstood where you were at on that then, perhaps. Sorry, why don't you restate your position? I apologize for interrupting.
I think the more we inform the public on this, the better off it will be when we have our public hearings. So if there are enough that want to do a town hall of some sort on this, what I do agree with Mayor Pro Tem Gillett is that we have thrown our staff under the bus on so many things like this. That's my only concern. So how do we do it without having that happen? And I certainly wouldn't want town halls to be all one perspective of one person. So, but I mean, so you got to have an open forum. You want to hear different perspectives from people. You've got to present it that way. So I think that would be the only thing I'd be concerned about, being able to have that kind of a thing before a public hearing. But I don't know if there's more that would consider that or not.
Okay, fair enough. I will reassess that consensus then. Councilmember Martinez, would you mind weighing in on this? Would you like to see a meeting prior to the public hearing? I think we've got, if you're in favor, I think we've got 3.
I can go either way. I just want to make sure that the way we do it is not so one perspective, that everyone's got some things happening, and that citizens understand. I mean, when I talk to neighbors about this, they're like freaked out. Like, really, you're going to do this? And then when I start to explain the research that is there is showing that that kind of restrictive spacing is not really very helpful, then they start to think about it. And as I said last week, our citizens are very reasonable. They can think. And so we give them some more information, and they're able to make some decisions from that. Usually they then say, well, I'd like a little bit of spacing. I'd like to have some knowledge that the school areas are very specific, so that we're working in concert with therapists and affirming that, yes, that's truly not where we want them to not only be visiting, but also be living and seeing and watching students all day long. That's what comes up. So a public forum could allow for conversations like that. The problem with a public hearing is that the woman who just raised her hand can't be answered tonight. We can't have a conversation with her. So that would be my affirmation of what she was presenting.
And so I've got you down for either way.
I don't know.
And if you'd like, we could continue this discussion at a later date. Keep in mind, there's only 6 of us tonight, so 4 of us would need to support something in order to gain consensus.
Okay, that's great.
Councilmember Martinez, would you like to weigh in on this? Again, we could pick this up at a later date if you'd like, or we can try to make a decision on whether or not to have a meeting tonight.
I'm actually in the same way of thinking with Councilmember Olson. I'm happy either way, flexible on that. So, I mean, whatever.
Okay, so we got 2 who want it, 2 who don't, and 2 who are happy either way. So
Maybe we should pick it up
I'm
later.
going to suggest that that's a draw, and that we're going to have to
the
continue
3rd.
this conversation on January 3rd. Then is going to be my suggestion. Councilmember Russell, if you wouldn't mind concluding your comments.
Okay. I just want to say Merry Christmas to everyone, and I just want to thank the staff for how hard they've worked this year. I greatly appreciate it. Merry Christmas.
Happy Hanukkah, too.
Can I still have the town hall anyway?
Yeah.
If I promise
the
not
city
to be
attorney
too
blessed it,
one-sided
seemed like.
with it? Or I can still plan that anyway? Okay, thanks. I guess.
Thank you. Moving on to Mayor's Choice, I would like to highlight just a few events that happened last week. I attended Sal Hewitt's memorial service. It was a beautiful memorial. I'm sorry again for the family lost there. Sal was an integral part of the city of Inglewood for many, many years. Wanted to highlight and thank the Mayor Pro Tem for filling in for me at the Dunkin' Donuts grand opening. I heard that went really well and was very well attended. They were giving away free coffee last week. Kaladi's Coffee is also open across the street on the same block. Plenty of good coffee in Inglewood these days, so please get out and get yourself a cup. last week I did speak with the two housing authority properties, both Orchard and Simon Center. The director of the housing authority, Renee Tullius, thank you, did announce her retirement. I wanted to thank her for her service to the city and to the housing authority. Let's see, Jerry Graber, I believe, is going to be taking over on January 1st. Did have an opportunity to meet with him and introduce myself and begin some discussions with him. Let's see. We talked about the agenda setting for moving forward. I did want to thank the folks who came forward with the Sanctuary City request. I am very interested in making sure that Inglewood is an inclusive and welcoming community to all. As a second generation, or I guess first generation American and son of an immigrant, I'm sensitive to those issues. Trying to look into what really is a sanctuary city, though, I realize that it's really just about police enforcement and local not prosecuting them solely for a violation of immigration laws. And I think that's our current status quo, if I'm not mistaken. And so, I understand this desire perhaps to, get involved in a more national issue. But I think locally here, again, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Keck or anybody from police, but I don't think we're looking for these type of violations here locally when we stop someone, when there's other, probable cause or anything like that.
That's accurate, Mayor. There is no concerted effort as of right now to force anyone out of the community nor profile anybody for race, nationality, sex, origin, any of that type of thing. So obviously if in fact an illegal alien who does commit a crime, they would go through the justice system, and we would allow the justice system and the courts to deal with that individual as they would see fit. But we don't do anything to enforce ICE's role, which is immigration. That's just not something we deal with.
And so, I guess I would say, and maybe I need to learn a little bit more about this issue and what's going on there, but again, I guess I'm thinking that we're already kind of a sanctuary city in that regard, and that we're not looking for these violations like some other cities and towns are, and that, the idea of branding ourselves as a sanctuary city is a political act, but, again, maybe I can look into that more and understand why that might be critical for us to move forward on now. But, for now, I don't see a major issue with that, and would be interested to see where this issue goes. Finally, I just wanted to thank everyone for coming tonight and wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy Holidays. I'd like to move on to the City Manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. Just quickly, because it seemed like there was a little confusion tonight about upcoming meetings. So you as a council will not meet as a body until Tuesday, January 3rd, and that will be a regular business meeting here at 7 p.m. So if you show up next week,
You're not here to be alone.
I might be here, but the rest of you don't need to be here if you don't want to be
But it's
here.
nice for the citizens to know, too.
Correct.
Don't show up.
Yeah. So the next meeting then after the 3rd would be Monday, January 9th, and that is a study session, but you will be interviewing board and commission applicants that night. January 17th will be the next regular business meeting, and then January 23rd will be your study session where you'll go over the financial report. You'll briefly discuss board and commission appreciation night gifts, Citizen of the Year selection process. You'll have a police building discussion where you'll understand where we are with that project and where things are going. Parks and Recreation Master Plan will be brought back for your final review. And then lastly, you'll have a quick, again, communications update. So there's your preview of coming attractions.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Moving forward to City Attorney's report.
Merry Christmas. I don't have anything.
Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, everyone. We are adjourned.
So were you wanting to say something? I don't know. Were you wanting to say something?
Oh, I think. I don't understand what you're saying, but I think there's better time to talk about it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, none of our meetings allow for that unless it's like a question. Yeah. Did you want to talk? Yeah, I would love to talk to you. Yeah, actually, I would. I would, because I'm really curious. Oh, no, the reason why I said I wanted you to attend is that's when we talk about what we will do with your information. You just saw what each one of us will vote.
I don't think they use that.
I went and talked at the Urban Renewal Authority meeting. So Urban Renewal Authority meeting where I'm sorry. That